In this lesson, we're going to solve equations when the lead coefficient is not 1. All right, so let's go ahead and solve an equation like 2x minus 7x plus 3 is equal to 0. So remember, what we're going to do is we're going to start by factoring into two binomials, and I need to find my lead coefficient, or my lead coefficient is 2x squared, so I know I can only have the 2, and I'm going to have an x and an x. And then let's go ahead and let's figure out then our factors. I have 1 times 3, and that's the only factors I can have for 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in a 1 and a 3, and now I do have to double check to make sure that I'm placing it in the right spot. So if I did 1 and 3 right here, remember we're looking for 7x. So this gives me a 1x, and this here gives me a 6x. And so now I've got the right numbers because I know I can make a negative 7 out of 6x and 1x. But we need to have that negative 7, and I need a positive 3. So I'm going to plug in a negative here and a negative here. And then when I go ahead and put those together, I'll have the 7x, and then I'll have, or the negative 7x, and I'll have a positive 3. So once we get to that point, just like we solved the ones before, let's go ahead now and we're going to say is equal to 0. And so I'm going to have 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, or x minus 3 is equal to 0. And x is going to be equal to, I'm going to add 1 and divide by 2, positive 1/2, or x is equal to, I'm going to add the 3 or 3. So my solutions are 1/2 or 3. All right, so for this one, notice how we have a negative coefficient. So just like we did in a previous lesson, let's factor out that negative 1. And that's going to give me 5m minus 6, m squared minus 6m plus 1. All right, so let's go ahead and start factoring. And I'm going to have a 5 and an m and an m. And now I have 1. So my factors of 1 are 1. So I can have a 1 and a 1. And let's take a look. I have a 1 and a 5. Now I need a negative 6m. So just like in the last one, we're going to have two negatives here. And so now that we factored it, let's go ahead and we're going to solve. And I'm going to have 5m minus 1 is equal to 0, or m minus 1 is equal to 0. So I'm going to have m is going to be equal to, I'm going to add 1 and divide by 5, or I'm going to add 1, m is equal to 1. So 1/5 or 1. All right, so for our next one, we have 25x squared minus 40x plus 16 is equal to 0. So now notice how this is a square and this is a square. So 5 squared and 4 squared. So that, if you kind of look at the pattern that we had learned before, I'm going to put the 5x in the 5x, and I have 16 is 4 and 4, and then remember, to get that negative 40, we had a minus. So this is a squared one. And so I have 5x minus 4, and we're only going to do this once because they're the same. And we're going to solve by adding the 4 and divide by 5. So x is going to be equal to positive 4 all over 5. And there's just one answer, or we're just going to put that in as just one, just 4 all over 5. We don't have to say it twice. All right, so for our next one, notice how we need to rearrange. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these two over here because I want to have a positive lead coefficient. And if I bring the negative 22 to the other side by adding, then what's going to happen is I'm going to have that negative lead coefficient. And it's okay, but so I'm going to plus a 3x squared, and I'm going to minus a 16. So I'll have 3x squared minus 22x minus 16, and now that's equal to 0. Remember, we have to set it to 0. Now let's go ahead and we're going to factor it. I'm going to have a 3x, and I'm going to have an x. And let's then, my factors of 16 are 2 and 8, 1 and 16. So let's start with the 2 and the 8. So let's say if I had 2 and 8, and let's just kind of, I'd have 2x, and I'd have 24x. Can I make a negative 22 out of that? Yeah, because 24 minus 2 is 22, and I need a negative. So that means that my bigger one has to be the negative, so that this becomes a negative 24, and this is going to become a positive. All right, so now that we've got that factored, let's go ahead and we're going to solve. So we have 3x plus 2 is equal to 0, or x minus 8 is equal to 0. So when we solve, I'm going to minus the 2 and divide by 3, so x is going to be equal to negative 2 all over 3, or x is equal to 8. All right, so for number 5, we have 9x squared plus 25 is equal to negative 30x. Now notice this one is not set to 0, so we need to go ahead and do that by adding the 30 x to both sides. And let's make sure we put it in descending order. So we're going to have 9x squared plus 30x plus 25 now is going to be equal to 0. Now notice this one, we have those squares. So for this one then, let's kind of, you're going to have 3x and 3x, and we're going to have 5 and 5, and because I have a positive 30, then I'd have plus. So notice then I'd have 30x, or 3x plus 5, so 3x plus 5 is going to be equal to 0. And we only have to do 1 because they're the same. And I'll minus the 5 and divide by 3, so x is going to be equal to negative 5 all over 3. All right, so for this next one, we have to simplify before we can start moving anything from side to side. So let's start here, and we're going to have 15x squared minus 14x, and then is going to be equal to 8. And now we need to set it to 0. So I have 15x squared minus 14x, and I'm minusing the 8 on both sides. So minus 8 is going to be equal to 0. So then let's go ahead and let's find our factors. All right, and our factors are 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. So let's just start, let's try the 3 and the 5 first. So 3x and 5x, and now my factors of 8 are 1 times 8 and 2 times 4. And so if we try the 1 and the 8 first, let's try that. 1 and 8. And I get 5, and I get 15. Can I make that into negative 14? Nope. So let's try another. Let's try 8 and 1. All right, there we get 40 and 3. Well, we're not going to make 14 out of that. All right, so let's try our 4 and our 2. Let's try 4 and 2 here. All right, so I'm going to get 20 and 6. All right, can I make that into 14? Yeah. So because 20 minus 6 gives us 14, but we need a negative 14. So I am going to have then a negative. So I get my negative 20 because I want that to be bigger, and then plus. All right, so that took a while. Okay, so now let's go ahead then, and this is equal to 0. All right, so we're going to have 3x minus 4 is equal to 0, or 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. X is going to be equal to, I'll add the 4 and divide by 3. Or you're going to subtract the 2, negative 2, and then divide by 5. So there we have that one. All right, so how do I solve functions when the lead coefficient is not 1? All right, so we have the f of x is equal to 0, where the f of x is equal to 15x squared plus 2x minus 8. So what we're going to do then is when we have that f of x, remember that that is like saying that the whole expression, or the y, we're going to plug in 0 for that f of x. is equal to 15x squared plus 2x minus 8. And again, we're just going to solve. And so I'm going to find my factors. And let's try 3x and 5x. And that's then for 8, let's try -2 and 4. So let's see if that's going to work. I have 10 and I have 12. Well, can I make that to be a positive 2? Well, I think I can if I have this be a positive, this be a negative. So we're going to have then -2 and positive 4. All right, so then let's just solve them both. We have 3x minus 2 is equal to 0, or 5x plus 4 is equal to 0. So we'll have x is equal to 2 all over 3. We added 2 divided by 3, or x is equal to minus 4 and divide by 5, so -4/5. All right, so for this one, we solve for x when h of x is equal to 10, where the h of x is equal to -x squared plus 2x plus 13. So let's start, and we're going to plug in the 10 where we have that h of x. So we have 10 is equal to -x squared plus 2x plus 13. All right, so remember we have to set it to 0, so I'm going to minus this 10. So I have -x squared plus 2x plus 3. I'm just going to move this 0 over here. And again, now I've got this negative, so I'm going to factor out that negative. So I'll have negative times x squared minus 2x minus 3. And so then we're going to factor this as well, x and x. And I'm going to have then a 3 and a 1. And I need a -2, so I'm going to make this a negative, this a positive. So x is equal to positive 3, or x is equal to -1. All right, in our last example, again, we're going to have, this is going to be replaced here for that. So -10 is going to be equal to x squared minus 10. Again, we have to set it to 0. Well, look what happened there. Well, it looks like I am done. X is going to be equal to 0.